Hi, I'm Helen from Woolly Chic, and in this short video I'm going to show you how to make this cute little Easter bunny which has an Easter egg hidden inside. So to make my Easter bunny I am using a 3.5mm crochet hook and this lovely West Yorkshire Spinners Colour Lab DK in the colourway Prism Brights. And it's a self-striping yarn, so it just means that the colour changes as you go. Nice and easy. Less ends to sew in. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start with a magic loop or a magic ring, and first lay the tail across your fingers, wrap the yarn around your middle 3 fingers and cross over. I'm just going to tuck that bit in between my little finger and this finger. I'm going to put the hook under the first strand and catch the second strand and pull it under, making a loop. And then we can turn it and get the working yarn and make a chain. Okay, so the pattern is starting off with 6 double crochets into the magic ring. So yarn around the hook, pull through 2 loops, yarn around the hook, pull through those 2 loops. That's your first double crochet stitch. And we're going to do that 6 times in total. Into the ring, catch the strand, 2 loops, yarn around the hook, pull through. That's 3, this is 4, 5 and 6. Okay, so we've got 6 double crochet stitches all in a row, or if you're in America they're single crochet stitches, but I use the UK crochet terminology in this video. Okay, so the magic ring is great because you can take the tail and give it a tug and give it a pull, and that closes up the center circle, makes it nice and neat. Then we need to turn it on its side and count back from the stitch that's nearest your hook. We're going to count back and find the first stitch that you made. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you've got this V here, which is the first one that you made, and you put your hook under both parts of the V, and then you go under the yarn, catch it and pull it through the stitch, and you have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn around the hook and pull through those 2 loops. Now that's your first stitch on round 2, so you're already starting on round 2. And in this round you're going to make 1 double crochet stitch in the first stitch, then move along to the second V, and into this stitch you're going to do 2 stitches, 1 in and 2. So that's increasing that stitch. So then moving on to the next, we do 1 in the next stitch, and moving on to the next, you put your hook in, and into this stitch we're going to do 2. So we're going to go back into that same stitch and make our second increase. Okay, then 1 in the next stitch and 2 into the next stitch. Now it's always important when you finish your round to count your stitches and make sure that you've got the right number of stitches. So here we need 9 stitches, so we've increased from 6 in the first round to 9 stitches in the second round. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we've got 9 V's, and if you turn it up towards you, you can see each of these individual stitches have got 2 parts and they form a V. Okay, so that's finishing on round 2. So for round 3 we're increasing from 9 stitches to 12 stitches. So on this round we're going to do 1 stitch in the first stitch, 1 in the next stitch, and then 2 in the third stitch. 1, and go back into that same stitch, 2. 1 in the first stitch, 1 in the second stitch, and then 2 in the third stitch. 1, and then if we pull that apart, we can see that this is the stitch you've just made, and it's got these 2 parts that are just coming up out of that hole here. So I'm going to put my hook back in next to that stitch underneath the V, catch the yarn and pull it round, 2 loops on my hook, yarn around the hook and pull that through. So we can see that coming out of that hole, hopefully you can see, there are now 2 stitches coming out of this hole. So that's your increase. So for the final increase, we're going to do 1 in the first stitch, 1 in the second stitch, and then 2 in this third stitch, and that will complete round 3. So then hopefully we will have 12 stitches. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 stitches. So for round 4, we're increasing from 12 stitches to 15 stitches. So for this round, we're going to do 1 double crochet in the first 3 stitches and then 2 in the next stitch. So we'll do 1 in the first stitch, 1 in the second stitch, 1 in the third stitch, and then moving on to the 4th stitch, we're going to go and we're going to do 2 stitches. 1, and going back into that same stitch, 2. So moving on, 1, 2, 3, and in the next stitch, 4 and 5. And again, 1 in the first stitch, 1 in the second stitch, 1 in the third stitch, and 2 in the 4th stitch. 1, 2. So we did 3 increases, and in total each set of stitches make 5 stitches, so 5 times 3 is 15. A lot of maths in crochet. Okay, so let's go, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So that completes round 4. Now for round 5, we're increasing from 15 stitches to 18 stitches. So we need to do 4 of the single double crochet stitches and then an increase. So we do 1 in the first stitch, 1 in the second stitch, 1 in the third stitch, 1 in the 4th stitch, and then in the 5th stitch we're going to make 2 stitches. So in, pull through 2 loops, and go back into that same stitch, that same hole, and make our second stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then into the 5th stitch, 1, and then a second stitch, 2. So that's your increase. 1 in the first stitch, 1 in the second stitch, 1 in the third stitch, 1 in the 4th stitch, and then in the 5th stitch, 1 and 2. And that completes your round 5. And let's just do a quick check and see that we've got 18 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Now you can see that my stitches are quite, not loose, but evenly spaced. And it means that it's easy for me to put my hook underneath those two parts of the stitch. So I can put my hook easily into this hole here. But if your stitches are too tight, then you might find that it's really tricky to be able to see where those stitches are and where to put your hook. So if you're finding that your stitches are too small, then I would go up a hook size, and that will kind of even out your tension. So for round 6 to 15, you're just going to do 1 double crochet stitch in each of those 18 stitches. So there are no more increases to this pattern. It's just 1 in each stitch. However, when you're starting out with crochet, it's really easy to accidentally add an extra stitch, so an extra stitch in the wrong stitch, and do an increase when you didn't intend to do an increase. So what I would say is count the stitches as you're going, maybe add a little stitch marker, so you can add just an alternative color of yarn to the beginning of your row. So I'm just going to add this little bit of pink in here and then put the loop back on my hook. Give that a bit of a tug. Okay, and then I'm going to make 18 stitches, so 1 in each. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So my last stitch goes in the stitch before the pink yarn. Okay, and at this point I would just count your stitches just to be sure. I mean, obviously I've counted as I've gone along, so there are 18 stitches, and then you can move your pink yarn onto your new last stitch. Okay, so let's do that. Let's see. So it's just moving it, and it just marks then that you'll be working up to it. Now what we're doing basically is an amigurumi pattern, and if you haven't heard of amigurumi before, it's the Japanese term for a stuffed toy, sort of 3-dimensional soft toy, and it's a technique whereby you're only using 1 stitch and either increasing or decreasing according to the shape of your pattern, and you are working in spirals. So this is why you kind of get this sort of effect here, where all your stitches are sort of slanted rather than in a line, because you're working in spirals with no turning chains. So I'm going to do 18 stitches and up until that first pink. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Trouble is the pink gets in the way. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and then I'm coming up to the last stitch before my pink, so that's the end of the round, and that's my 18th stitch. So that's the end of round 7. So I've done 2 out of the 10 rows that have no increases, so I'm just going to go and carry on and do another 8 rows of 18 stitches. So I've just finished round 14, and what I would do at this point is try it on my Easter egg and see if it's the right size, and if I need to do many more rows or just one to finish off the pattern. No, that's probably enough. So I've probably finished there because that fits nicely. So it's always good to try it on your egg and just check that you're not making your stitches too tight and it's difficult to get on the egg. The other way of counting rows, if you have kind of forgotten where you are, or you haven't been counting as you go along, it's really easy to put your work down and then pick it up again and think, oh, I don't know where I am. So you can turn your work inside out and then count. It's quite easy to count the rows from here. So we've got one, and they're kind of these ridges mark the indentations between the rows. So let me just count to see how many. I think I've got 14, but let's just count and check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14. I have. So that's 14 rounds, which I think is big enough for my cream egg. Okay, there we go. So that finishes off the body. So I just need to cast off now. Okay, so to do that, pop the loop back on the hook and make a chain. And at this point, just pull up a loop and then cut at the top of your loop, and then pull the yarn away and pull that one, and that makes a nice neat knot. And then you want to leave a decent length tail so that you can thread that onto a wool needle and just sew in your ends. Okay, so there we go, we've finished the rabbit's body. So now the ears, they're a bit fiddly because they start with fewer stitches, but we're going to start again with our magic loop. So again, have the yarn over your fingers, wrap it round 3 of your fingers and cross it over. Just tuck that there. Then take your hook under the first loop and catch the second loop through and make a loop. And then make a chain. And to start off the ears, we're going to do 4 double crochets into this magic loop. So you put your hook into the loop. I'm holding on to the strands here so that they don't sort of get smaller or disappear. So my hook is going in, catching the yarn and pulling it through. I've got 2 loops on my hook, yarn around the hook and pulling it through those 2 loops. So that's my first double crochet stitch. So again, I'm going in, pulling a loop through, 2 loops on my hook, yarn around the hook, pulling through 2. So into the ring, making a double crochet stitch, that's 3, and then the 4th one, there we go. So with this pink it's a bit more difficult to see the stitches, but can you see that there are 4 V's there in a row? So we're going to make them into a ring now, into a circle, and by pulling the tail closes up the circle, and then we can turn the work and put your hook under the first of those double crochet stitches that you made. So counting back 1, 2, 3, 4, this is the first stitch, putting our hook under both parts of the V, yarn around the hook and pulling through, and we're going to make our first double crochet stitch of the round into that stitch. So for the ears, we're going to increase from 4 stitches to 6 stitches in round 2. So we've done 1 stitch in the first stitch and then 2 stitches into the next stitch. 1, 2, 1 into the next one, and 2 into this one. Now this one is a bit fiddly, I've got to find the V. There we go, So we're going to do 2 into this stitch. 1, 2. Now I did say it was fiddly, didn't I? You've not got much to hold on to here, but this forms the tip of your bunny ears. So I'm just going to double check that I have got my 6 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's quite a big one here, and that is your 6th stitch. But that's the first one that we're going to be putting our hook into for the next round. So for round 3, I'm just going to move that to the side, put my hook under both parts of the V. So for round 3, we're just going to do 1 in each stitch. So there's 6 stitches in round 3. So 1 in the first stitch, 1 in the second stitch, moving it around each time, 1 in the third, 1 in the fourth. And can you see I'm just using my thumb on my left hand just to kind of manipulate the stitches, just to move them around so that I can get my hook underneath that stitch there for the 4th stitch and the 5th stitch. And then this last stitch here. Okay, so that's 1 in each stitch. We haven't increased for this round, and I'm just going to give them a bit of a tug, moving them so that I can see the V's of these stitches. Don't know if you can see those, but I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches there. Okay, right, so for round 4 we're going to increase from 6 stitches to 9 stitches. So into the first stitch I'm going to do 1 stitch, oops, and at this point is, yeah, not into this stitch but moving on to this stitch. So 1 into the first stitch and then 2 into the next stitch. Gosh, this is really fiddly. Right, 2 into the next stitch, 1, 2, moving around, 1 into the next stitch. Well, because it's so fiddly and I'm trying to do the stitches loose, it's pinging off my hook. Okay, but that's fine. You can just reposition the loop that's on your hook, and the nice thing about crochet is you don't lose all of your stitches. So back into the next one for 1 stitch. Now I've forgotten how many stitches I did in the last one, so pulling it apart I can see that there are 2 stitches coming out of that 1 stitch, so therefore it's just 1 into the next one and then 2 into the next stitch. So 1, 2. Okay, I'm going to count because I've kind of lost track of where I am. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So with 8 stitches, I know that I've got to do 1 more increase. So my last stitch was an increase. So I'm moving around with 8 stitches. I'm not doing an increase into the next one. So 1 into that. So that's still 8 stitches. And then moving on to the next stitch, I'm going to do 2 in the next stitch. And that will have increased to 9 stitches. And we can count. And look, we're changing colour now. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that then completes round 4. So for round 5, we're not going to increase. We're just going to do 1 in each stitch. So I'm just going to count as I go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So that completes round 5. Now we just need to do 5 more rounds where there are no increases and it's just 9 stitches. So 1 in each stitch for 9 stitches, and you just keep going until your desired length of bunny ear. So I'm going to do another 5 rows. So I'm just going to do one more round of 9 stitches. Now it's always worth just sort of checking at the end of every round that you've got the right number of stitches, and if you haven't got the right number of stitches, then look back at your round and it might be that you have missed a stitch or you've done 2 in the same stitch. So just pull out those stitches, pull back to where you've got the right number of stitches, and then carry on. So I'm coming up now to 9 stitches, and so I've finished my ear. It's about the right size. So I'm going to do a chain, pull up a big loop, and then cut at the top. Pull that away and pull that end. Looks a bit like a finger, but it's a bunny ear. So you need to make 2 of these, and as they say, Blue Peter style. There we go. Here's one I've made earlier. So there's your 2 bunny ears and your body, and it's ready for sewing up. So next we've got to just sew in all the ends and sew the ears onto the body. So I'm just threading the yarn, the tails onto a wool needle. It can be a bit tricky when it's split like this, but if you've got a wool needle with a really big eye, then it shouldn't be a problem. It should be quite easy. Okay, so at this point you can use your tail to sew up any holes, or just sew over any gaps, and I'm just going to feed the needle underneath the stitches just to pull that center in nice and tight, and then I can just lose the end here under these stitches, just finding a little place, and then I would just poke it into the middle of your rabbit's body here, and then just take your scissors and give that yellow strand a bit of a snip. So snip it off inside. There we go, that's nice and neat. And then do the same at the bottom. Okay, but we're going to use the tails on the bunny ears to actually attach them to the body. We'll just again take the yarn and just feed it underneath those double crochet, through the middle of those double crochet stitches one way, and then you can kind of go into a few other stitches in a different direction, and that secures it in place. What you must never do is cut off your tail ends at the knot, because they will just start to unravel and all your hard work will come undone. Okay, so that's neatened up the body. Okay, so with these ears you're never going to see what's going to be in the middle, so you can just literally take the needle, again sew up any holes, or if you wanted to maybe make a tighter point or a neater point, you can do that by sort of securing your stitches over and over, giving it a bit of a tug, and then just poke the needle all the way in through the middle, and you can then lose the end in the middle of your bunny ear. As I say, you're never going to see the inside of the ear, so don't worry about making that end too neat. So I'm just cut that off. There we go. Now with this tail, we're going to use this to sew it onto the rabbit's body. Okay, but first I think I'm just going to go all the way around these bottom stitches here, just to kind of give that a bit of more sort of definition and shape to the bottom of the rabbit's ear. Just pulling that in a bit. Okay, right. So just find, just left of centre, a place to join your ear. And then all I'm going to do is sew over and over round the edge of this ear to secure it into place. That's why it's always best to leave quite a decent sized tail when you finish, when you break your yarn, just so you've got enough yarn to be able to use to sew on any bits and pieces. Okay, I think that's quite secure, gone all the way around. I'm also running out of yarn, so I'm just going to do one more stitch here, and then there we go, nice and secure. And again, I'm then going to just feed that end back through the middle. Oops, that didn't quite work. Just do that again. Feed it in to the middle of the ear. And lose it into the middle. There we go, give that a tug. There we go. Right, so that's your first ear secured. So let's just quickly do the second one. I'm just going to go over and over and make that a bit pointy, and then lose my end all the way through and cut that off. Give that a tug. There we go. So again, I'm just going to sew all the way around the bottom of these last row, just to bring that in a bit and give it a bit more shape. Okay, and then it's ready to sew next to the other one. Right. And again, I'm just going to sew all the way around one side just to secure it into place. There we go, last few stitches. And losing the end in the middle of the ear. Just give that end a snip and a pull. There we are, that's all sewn together. Now there's only one thing it needs. Well, it needs the egg, but then it needs a nice pom-pom tail to finish it off.